Hi, I'm Michele Longabaugh, and I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and I'm going to share a little bit about my patient advocacy in translational research, which I will explain in a minute, so you don't have to raise your hand and say, what the heck is that? And this is my experience. So I'm going to tell a little bit about my story, and this is a picture of me, and you can clearly see it's like much younger than me. This picture was actually taken by my son in 2009 in September, and I had cancer in this picture and I didn't know it. I actually had had cancer since July and I didn't know it because I thought I had a hemorrhoid. And it wasn't until February of 2010 when I thought my hemorrhoid had gotten completely out of control that it was discovered that I had stage 4 anal cancer. I was actually given a pretty bleak prognosis. All those things that Danny talked about at the cells, my cells didn't look good in the bone where it was growing out of my sacrum. I had to have surgery to have that removed. And they told me if I did the treatment, I probably could live about 3 years. This was in 2010. So I'm approaching, thank you. I appreciate the round of applause, but I really didn't do anything special. I just am an anomaly. So here I am. I've actually had a couple of recurrences. I recurred in my lung. Exactly 2 years after I was NED, I recurred in my lung. NED means no evidence of disease. And when you're given stage 4 cancer diagnosis, they tell you they can't cure you. They just tell you whether you've got active disease or not. So, and Danny is celebrating because I used a term and someone had to ask me what it is. And I see him saying, yes. So it's okay. It's okay. But no evidence of disease is kind of been my status off and on. And actually, I just got back from Houston, and there was a little spot in my lung that they've been watching, and it disappeared. So I remain NED. I just found that out. I found that out right before Thanksgiving. So I'm very grateful for that, and they're giving me 4 months off for good behavior. So here I am. And, you know, when I was first diagnosed, they told me I had 3 years to live. So besides spending a lot of money, I kind of just floundered around just trying to exist. I didn't really care about research. I just cared that I was going to die and I was going to miss out on a whole bunch of things in my life. I had, you know, a husband and 3 children that were 2 in college and 1 in high school, and I had 4 dogs and 2 horses, and I loved my life. And so I kind of wandered around for 3 years. Well, my expiration date kind of came and went. And when that happened, I'm like, well, now what? Well, I'd been writing a lot. I started a blog called I Have But What out on Tumblr and kind of wrote my whole experience. And my physician down in Houston, Dr. Kathy Eng, is a world cancer leader for anal cancer. She's famous. Well, she's a lot more famous now because she knows me. But anyway, she had read some of my writings, and so I started getting involved writing at the patient perspective for journals. There was a whole journal on anal cancer. I'm sure you've all seen it. The Surgical Oncology wrote a journal, and I wrote an entire chapter, and it was chapter 1. They cared what the patient thought, what was my experience, what was my lived experience. So I started there, and then I got excited because I'm like, I know my purpose. I know why I'm still here. I know what I'm doing. So I got to get involved with some research through Dr. Eng. So translational research is what I do, and there's a lot of definitions of it, and it's less clear than the definitions of basic and clinical research. It's what happens in between, and that's the best way that I can talk to you about what happens in the Petri dish and then the big clinical trials that happen. There is a whole lot of work that goes on in between there, and that's what I'm involved with. This is the way I kind of look at things. If you see the light bulb at the very, very beginning, that's like an idea that a researcher has, and then it kind of goes through this whole process where we finally figure out that we're doing it right and hit the arrow. So I'm actually working, I love laser pointers. I actually work kind of in this area, just weighing things. Does it work? What do people think? How much time does it take? So I'm going to talk about that, what I do. So I sit on 2 different committees for that. My involvement is with the National Cancer Institute, or NCI, And I decided to use acronyms, but I wrote out the definition of them. I sit on the Squamous Cell Carcinoma Specialized Programs of Research of Excellence, which is a SPORE committee, and is also involved in the Moonshot program. And I also sit on the NCI Rectal Anal Task Force, but we just call it the RATF. And I really think it's because people don't like the word anal. I think they're okay with rectal. I think everyone thinks colorectal is like okay, but nobody wants to use the word anal. And you know, you can't put that in emails because it'll be put into somebody's junk mail. It happens. It's okay. I'm over it, kinda. I'm a little bitter, a little bitter. So let me talk to you just for a minute on what I do on the SPORE committee. This was the very first time I'd ever been involved in research as a patient voice. I was a little scared. So let me tell you, I travel down to Houston. I go into a room that's about 2 times the size of this, and it is packed. It is packed with physicians and healthcare providers and researchers, and my doctor was there, and a lot of other doctors were there, and they are in there, and they all have an opinion. So this is things that they've taken, ideas that have come out of the lab that kind of have already been through the rat phase, and they're kind of talking about how we're going to get this in humans and what will work. So they blab out ideas. See that? A lot of ideas. And they stand up and say, oh, that's ridiculous, that'll never work. And some of them stand up and say, oh, this is a good idea. So they talk and kind of debate. How are they going to lay these out? They have these goals, they want to do 2 or 3 things. They're talking about 2 or 3 different kinds of cancer. Actually, they weren't talking about anal cancer on the day I was there. They were just talking about squamous cell cancer, and anal cancer was never brought up. I'm not bitter about that either. And there were only 4 patient advocates in the room, and I was one of them, and I like to think of myself as this girl right here. And I stood next to him, and he was really knowledgeable about head and neck cancer because he had it, and he was like the dude. And the other gal had had cervical cancer, and this gentleman also had had a tonsil cancer, I believe, that was squamous cell. The room gets quiet. They have the advocates stand up, and they say, so what do you think? I was like, what? But the questions were great. This guy right here is standing next to, it wasn't his first rodeo, so he was really pretty good. So he stood, and he asked some really good, important questions. They cared what we had to say because they were going to bring research design forward. We talked about cancer moonshot. Moonshot is anything that can be done in 5 years or less. I'm hurrying home. Anything that can be done in 5 years or less. I actually wrote a letter of support, and as Cheryl said, that's really easy to do because they just sent me kind of a form letter, and then I could fill it out with my patient experience. I'm going to really hurry. So the Rectal Anal Task Force is a little bit different. We do it by teleconference. It's once a month, and it's very limited. There's only, there are a lot of doctors on it, only 2 patients. We get an update on what the research is that's going on, the smaller studies that are in patients, how's it going. We actually get studies in the mail, and we get to read them, and we decide if they're good or not, or if we like them, or if we think patients can participate. And then we did kind of make a decision whether new way or old way, which one works better. And it really does impact people. So advocacy to me is really important because it lends my voice. And this is what's really important to me because I've made a lot of friends that have passed away from my type of cancer. So I feel like I'm their voice and the voice for their family and the voices of people that are stigmatized by their disease. Anal cancer is a pretty stigmatized disease, as you can imagine. Nobody likes to talk about it. And I believe that I'm helping people that I don't even know and may help people in the future that I don't even know. So that's hope, right? That's hope for the future. And I'm just going to give you a really quick summary of what hope means to me, and then I'm going to sit down. So what's the future look like for me? I got to see a wedding. That's my daughter. She got married just last year. My son got his doctorate degree. I was there. I should have been dead. I was well expired. My other son got to move to New York City and become a digital editor of a fashion magazine. I really thought that kid was going to put me in a grave anyway. So to see him be successful and paying taxes, I am like so stoked. He was like my lost child. And then that's my husband, my ever-loving husband, who I'd love to retire with. And finally, the thing that I took off my bucket list that I never thought would happen for me. That's my granddaughter, Willa. So I thank you for your time.